but I put two nines together. Including.
And we are live.
What we did. It's a two-man team. Yeah, that's one. It's a district. Some roads. Person, it's a handicapped person. Carries through to the end, no matter when you play. That doesn't sound right. That's the way handy system is set up. So now the new. It's what you're doing.
Okay.
Today's handy. So I have no idea. But for games or something. Delayed first thing in school. Cheat to cheat. You're just cheating yourself when you do that. I don't even know one person in the whole life to do that. Why he does it. It's against yourself. Tell you what, here's. Usually the guy popping the ball. Keep the whole thing enforcement. Fortunately, it's here. It's up here. This is going to John. Can you go to 18? So I was up here.
Not this week, but either you maybe this
Down
one.
below here.
Get together next week. I just can't do it this week. I've got too much else.
Couldn't find it. Couldn't find it. And drop one.
It's got found it. There's a guy says I saw it.
Oh, my.
So I came in blue. So came up to me and says, "See, really? I don't know." It was happy. So there's some other news. Hey, Doug. Right. This is level. But in 4 minutes.
All right, the meeting will please come to order. This is the City of Prospect regular city council meeting held every month. The day is June 21st, 2021 at 7 p.m. And the first order of business on the agenda is an executive session for the purpose of discussing the acquisition or sale of property and the appointment, discipline, or dismissal of an employee. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
This,
Now we have
this
two
is Chris.
choices.
Ron, can you email me the number to call into the executive session?
I'm going to call you on my cell phone and bring you in that way.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have two choices. Either the entire city council can move or you two gentlemen can step in and close the door. Which will it be?
And we need to make sure Ron turns off the stream.
Ron, you need to turn off the live stream.
Yes, sir. I'm going to kill the microphones and put a thing up and let everybody know where you're at. So give me just a second. You will have to give me a heads up when you all are done so I can come turn your microphone back on.
That's Chris. I'm on.
That were a lot of hands, real tight.
Yes. Okay.
That's good.
All right, the council is back in open session. I would like now to nominate John Carter to be our city clerk beginning on the 1st of July. And I ask the council to approve that nomination.
I move that we approve it.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it, and Mr. Carter will be our city clerk. Thank you. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the regular city council meeting of May 17th, 2021. Those minutes were circulated. Are there any additions or corrections?
I move their approval.
You move to approve,
Second.
seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? They're approved. All right. Mayor's report, update on city matters. The first item has to be this, that Laura's last day will be June 30th, which is 9 days from now. I can't say how valuable she has been. She will be succeeded by our new city clerk, but she can't be replaced. That was hard to say. Number two, Mark Madison of Milestone says that we will have their report on the City Hall parking lot this week. Third, as to the study of the culvert under Hunting Creek Drive, MSD engineer John Leckley tells me they will be meeting this week with Cornerstone Engineering, and then they will get back to us with a schedule. Fourth,
Can I
litigation,
ask one question?
yes,
Who would be actually doing the work?
they would,
MSD.
yes.
Okay, MSD, Don was there also. MSD is trying to, let me start with, as he wrote us, the affordable, the ARP.
Right.
Thank you. Anyway, money in most cases is not capable of being used by small cities. And MSD, because of the one carve out of things they would do that clearly meet the requirements of the act, are partnering to get work done earlier and using our money that we can't touch, but it would fund it. And with them, it would move us up in priority to get things done. Did I say that backwards?
Yes, you said it right. And we could use their engineering capability.
And they would do it, but instead of waiting in line, they only have $2 million a year for these kinds of things. That's all that, which makes no sense to me at all, because they collect way more than that. But they've only got $2 million, so very often, a very long list and almost nothing they can get done. Whereas this would free up money because they tap into our stuff that we can't use. Anyway, it definitely is worth looking into.
All right, somebody's going to have to explain to me how that would work, because unless the money is budgeted, we don't have it to spend, or I don't.
No, and it's not like that. They're, one of the things they talk about is every bill has got to be kept and very carefully, because the auditing is going to be incredible on the back end
But
of
who
it.
pays that bill?
I think that's what we should be looking into.
The American Recovery Act may, if it qualifies, it's just separate buckets. It's under
So someone else would be paying the bill.
Or
Yeah,
we
very-
would, but it would be targeted for this specific project with MSD.
I understand, but if it's not in the budget, I can't spend it.
Yeah, you can. Because all we would do.
Somebody write that down.
No, here's the deal. If it met the qualifications, if it was acceptable, if we could do it with MSD, you bring in a budget amendment and we deal with it.
I get it. All
Okay.
right.
And Don, did, MSD made the presentation, didn't they?
They did.
They did.
Yeah. So they have people who could shepherd us through the process?
Frank, they implied that.
Yes, they did.
Well,
Carefully.
carefully. Well, you remember, they still owe us a bundle of money.
Yeah.
They're not gonna pay us because they say they don't have any money. But anyway, I wonder how that would fit.
I think there is a caveat in the rescue plan where it talks about local cities can basically
Partner.
redistribute the money, so it never really comes to our budget. Now, it sounds very like, I mean, wishy-washy, but I mean, I would hope if they want that money, I hope they hire someone.
They had a
Well-
whole list of projects.
Curtis.
MSD has a whole list of projects that's winning capital funding. What they're suggesting is that partnering with local cities, they can dip into the American Recovery Water restructuring and get money in this separate fund.
Do we know who's championing this down at MSD? Do we know?
We
There
could
was a
find
guy
that,
that gave
yeah,
that
there was-
presentation,
We
yeah.
could find that out quite easily. In fact, there were 3 people. Only one seemed to be in charge.
He was in your email, I think.
One didn't.
Yeah, it's certainly.
Well, I know there are engineers down there, so I can talk to them.
I don't know that we were talking to an engineer. I mean, I don't think that that's quite exactly where we were. I would go ahead with what you're doing. And if it looks like it looks like something needs to get done, then I think we can move forward after that.
All right. Anybody want me to continue with my update or?
We can hardly wait, John.
Well, if you feel that way, we could just move on.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to tell you about the LDG stuff. Their litigation regarding Prospect Cove is endless. I told you last time that they've gone back to the circuit court to ask it to reconsider their ruling, which was against LDG. Whatever the circuit court does, and I expect that they will not reconsider and they'll continue to find our way, but whichever way it goes, I expect it will be appealed to the Court of Appeals. And that process will consume more than a year and of course, more legal fees. The other LDG proposed development is stalled, it seems to me. One thing, there's a lawsuit pending which alleges that the property was never effectively rezoned and that it is still zoned for single-family residences. That's one thing. The other thing is the Kentucky Historic Property Agency, I forget its exact name, but their executive director has written a letter down to the Metro Agency, which says that the state disagrees with Metro's position. Metro's position is that the development would not adversely affect historic nearby properties. So in other words, the state of Kentucky says that it will adversely impact historic properties. And under federal law, it's not allowed to do that. So that's where that sits. We're 2 weeks away from our 4th of July event. There will be a parade. There will be fireworks. There will be food trucks. We will have a big band in the evening before the fireworks. So I just wanted everybody to know that. Any questions?
Is there gonna be a published flyer
Yes,
with times on this?
yes. It will go out this week.
John, when you said any questions, does that conclude your report or just on the 4th?
It does.
Okay, can I have just 30 seconds? I know we've all said things to Laura on a personal level, but since this is a meeting that the public can see, I want Laura to know that it's not just coming from you, that we're going to miss you. Thank you for all of your hard work and all of your years of service. And I've enjoyed working with you and I wish you every success. And I think I speak for all of us, but we're going to miss you. Good luck.
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, I had intended to say more, but I got choked up. All right, next on the agenda.
Chris's audio does not work.
John, one comment on LDG, just here or there. They seem to have hired a marketing guy because you see LDG doing
Yeah.
a lot of, civil involvement and that type of stuff. And they show up in business, periodicals
I
and,
know.
and they're joining with somebody, Norton Hospital, or somebody do, some
Do it this way.
pro bono work or whatever, I don't know, but they're really going at it hard, hot and heavy.
Chris, are you back on?
Yes, I'm back on. Thank you.
Do you need to be on my phone or can I turn this off?
The only thing that's working is the phone, I think.
I'll leave it on.
Okay, thank you.
Committee reports, Fire Station Board, Mr. Tucci. Step up to the podium. Well, the best news from the Forest Station Board is that our good memory some months, but she's back and working, great job, and we're very happy.
Great, thank you. So far as the forestation board projects, Lim Walker finished treating 9 city ag trees for emerald ash borer. We were expecting their invoice on Tuesday. I don't know if it's come in or not here at City Hall, hasn't yet. Andrew was going to call them and bug them again, but try to get it in. The main thing we have right now, somewhere between 17 and 20 dead or declining ash, or not ash, but other trees, including some on city property. 2 honey oaks, which have already been removed from the front of City Hall, are in bad shape. We have a couple in Sutherland, one on a residence and one on a medium. We have 3 on Sutherland Farm Road. All those are all city trees, really. There's 2 at McDonald's. There's 7 ash trees at Circle K. I had a call to look at a tree on Deep Cove. We have a sycamore that's threatening the picnic table at Hunting Creek Park, and there's a picnic table right near the parking area. And then I just got a note again that there's a dead pine on borderland for Suffolk, which is not included in my total. And Andrea has stated that she thinks there are some problem trees along 42, and she's just looking for a good opportunity to survey those, ID whether they're state or privately owned. She'll be working on that. She's out of town this week, but when she gets back. Any questions?
Most of those trees are on federal property.
The ones on along 42?
Yes.
Yeah,
I assume you're talking on this side of the road.
yeah. She, in the past, she got the state to take out some along the not the landing, but the big condos off of the hill on 42. And that was, she had a good contact, and they came out and did it. Very good.
That's probably what we're gonna have to end up doing, getting the state to deal with.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Usually,
Report from the library, please.
The library is happy to say that we are going to be scheduling a used book sale in the early fall. We cannot wait. We have got more books upstairs than we've ever had before. The fire department is not happy with us, and we've run out of places to hide them. So the group will be getting together to come up with an actual date, but they've all, by email, they've all agreed that it needs to be early fall.
You have that here, right?
Upstairs. Yes, and we have children's books. You can bring your daughter.
She was up there the other day. Well, hopefully it wasn't too noticeable.
She's quite,
She was up there. But she was.
that's fun.
Herb, do you have a report on the US 42 study?
yes,
I'm also very happy to say that we're making a little progress. We did get on Thursday, information back from our contact, the project manager for the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. And I'll read it. It's very short. I have been told that the memorandum of agreement is being circulated for signature. It will then go to the programming staff to prepare the financial side of the process. So once that comes through, we can then advertise for a consultant. So the timetable now, it's been moved. Well, we were told that to be patient, and so that is what we're being. But actually, if the timetable meets the milestone they've listed, this time next year, June 2022, we will have the finished planning study in our hands. The first scheduled public meeting is going to be in November. So there'll be a second public meeting in February. Any questions? Okay.
Thanks, sir. I have a question for Laura. Did Linda Wardell give us a written report from the Parks Committee?
She did submit a written report, and I believe there was one
That was in the
update.
packets.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, the update for the Putney Pond, study, from ICF. We're having another meeting for the parks on 23 June at 10 a.m. at City Hall, and Lee Droppelman from ICF will explain, what all the options were, what they need, how the cost factors in, all of that.
Sarah, you and Doug, I think maybe Don, were all at the Parks Committee the last meeting. Is that correct?
I know I was there, to be honest. They all played together. You all are normally there, but to be
When
honest,
they
I can't
talked
remember.
about the recommendations that this outfit made with regard to Putney Pond, and I wondered if you would.
Oh, can I
touch on
recap?
that.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I think, so don't quote me, but they're gonna send out the study information to all of us after we have this meeting on the 23rd, so that parks, I think the idea is so that Linda we can sit as the parks, get a grasp of what it all is, and then all come together, with you all after that. It was, I think it was 4, it may have been five options. I think it's 4. And it starts with kind of a low cost sort of scenario, which is in the ballpark of that 5 to 10K-ish sort of scenario, which was basically, hey, it's transitioning. Maybe we put up some educational signs. Stop me if I get too in detail. Some educational signs, do some invasive plant removal to kind of get some natural trees, whether we do a fundraising event to have people plant their trees, like Save the Trees campaign or whatever. Couple routes for that. And then basically that's it.
Plant.
So it would be, if you wanted to do it along Putney Lane, that would be where kind of the invasive removal, if you're on Putney Lane looking at the pond, but you can't actually see the pond from there, but
So we
it's there.
take down the invasive plants that are there and plant new ones.
So there are actually trees, like, there's actual native growth trees that are there, but they're just getting eaten by the invasives, the vines, the honeysuckles. There was one dogwood that I didn't know it was a dogwood, but, Bob Holly was out there and he's like, here, Sarah, come look at this. This is a dogwood. And then it was just covered in all the honeysuckle and how the vines wrap around and basically kill out. I mean, you have honeysuckle, but you're going to start getting erosion. Anyways, all of those, with more detail there, but that's kind of the low end idea. And then kind of in the middle somewhere in there was, each proposal was adding on to earlier steps. So basically in the middle somewhere is to do all of that, do a little purposeful channeling of the natural stream that would run through there continuously and cut a V shape down in someone throw out.
The dam.
Thank you. And the dam, cut a V shape in there. So not the whole thing, just to be Bob Holly. It was confusing to me at first. So he explained it was perfect. So I'll give it a shot. It would obviously drain it faster. We'd transition, that would be a choice we'd make. We would transition to a wetland faster. We'd get a more purposeful stream. But in those high flood events, i.e. the erosion, to maybe talk to MSD about on Timber Ridge behind that, is you now gain a full 20 inches of flood capacity. So as all that backflow or whatever, from the storms, it would fill back up, basically the pond we have now. It would spill through the little notch that was cut, but continue to fill back up, and you hopefully wouldn't have it topping the road that's there, potentially. I can't.
Yeah,
He explained it very
What
well.
would it do to the marina?
So it would actually keep it from flash flooding so much. And like I said, it was confusing to me at first, and he did a good job of explaining as to why, and so I might not be doing it justice.
Maybe you better
But-
bring him.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the point, is so that Lee can hopefully explain it very well, that, you know, hey, you're draining it, but now you've got all of that area where water sits now to fill back up during those flash floods before it even starts to really top that part of the dam, well before it even goes up on the road. So hopefully you've lessened any flooding we've ever had by the same amount that you cut that notch in. And then it continues to go up to more planned areas of like creating deeper pools in certain areas to keep the heron there, you know, for longer periods of time or permanently, and creating a sediment forebay. We're talking now, we're like way off in price now. Sediment forebay to basically collect the sediment, ship it out on a regular basis. This is like a probably multi-monthly, bi-monthly sort of scenario at a cost of getting a contractor. But if you wanted to keep a pond, so there's a couple of waypoints of,
Actually, one of the things that has been interesting about that is that we have snowy egrets in there and the bald eagles fish in there. And I think that's a consideration too, so.
yeah, and I don't believe that meeting is going to be televised, though, on the 23rd. But it is here. So again, at 10 a.m., if anybody can make it for that. If not, there'll obviously be detailed notes taken, and contact information given for everybody, but that may be one if you're able to.
Is that July?
No, that is
This week.
a couple, two days from now. Sorry, I don't have my phone on me. But yes, and again, that's so that, and I'm sure that Linda is going to re-explain it all again to all of us at the next council meeting.
Yeah, I just want to add that when you see these different options, you're going to be stunned by the prices.
That they're so low.
No,
It was
Couldn't get
never,
my hand over that about.
Jesus.
we have never had a discussion of this where the prices were low, ever.
But part of it is the key that, and I don't know, we probably can't get together before that meeting on the 23rd, obviously, but maybe just something for us to chat in general. I guess it would have to be a council meeting, but what the end state, what we agree on, even if it's not the end state together, but like how far along do we agree in that process? And because there are some waypoints, you know, there's no decision, and there's an option for that too, you know, but a lot of them have some waypoints.
okay. Any questions? Not, we'll turn the meeting over to Bill Maher and Jennifer French, our auditors. And they're from Strothman and Company.
Yes. So good evening. We brought some paper copies. I think you had some PDF copies sent. Would anybody like a paper copy? No, we're good. Certainly. She'll pass those out. And then I just brought a brief agenda, so you're not staring at me the whole time of some things I'm going to be covering. So my name is Bill Meyer with Strothman Company. I put together a presentation tonight. You know, what would I want to know if I were in your shoes? So that's kind of what I'm covering, but we'll be glad to take any questions as we go along or at the end. I do the easy questions, Jennifer does the hard questions.
Good to know.
So basically, just briefly, going to introduce ourselves a little bit since you don't know us very well. Just kind of talk about the timeline that we've been working under, the audit results, which are the most important. Just a few comments on the overview of the financial statements, some highlights, and then I had a few recommendations or comments about the future. So on page 3 of my introduction, so Strothman and Company, we've been around since 1983. We're a top 5 Kentucky-owned CPA firm, and about 20% of our revenues come from governmental and nonprofit clients. City of Lexington is our largest city client until a few weeks when we regained the City of Louisville audit. Again, we did that audit for 13 years and then rotated off, but we're back again. So I've been around Strothman and Company 25 years and was with PricewaterhouseCoopers before that. Did a lot of been doing government my whole career. And then Jennifer French is an audit principal. She's been with us 13 years and 17 years at other places, and we've worked together on a lot of these type projects. So on page 4 of the timeline, so Laura originally contacted us about doing the June 30th, 2021 audit. We had that discussion and was a successful proposer on that. And then to our surprise, I got a call from the former CPA firm, Don Lawson, who I didn't realize had transitioned the firm to some younger partners. And he said they were having trouble getting the June 30th, 2020 audit done. Could we be available to do that? And we had discussions with Laura and the mayor, and we stepped in and signed an engagement letter for that audit on April 12th, 2021. And Jennifer, to her credit, put together a team, and I think she was off for a week, but had a team working. And so here, June 11th, we issued the fiscal 2020 audit. So it was a credit to our team and Laura and the mayor that we were able to get that done. You've had, obviously, tragic death with your former bookkeeper, and so some things fighting against us there, but we were able to get it done. So on page 5, I don't know if anybody's ever explained governmental financial statements to you. This is my little 3-minute explanation. So first part's the audit opinion. That's the most important thing. And then I'm going to skip and go to pages 5 and 8. The fund financial statements are what governmental financial statements have been for the last 50 years. And then someone in their wisdom 20 years ago or so said, well, we need something called government-wide financial statements. That's on pages 3 and 4. They're on the full accrual basis. Your fixed assets are recorded on those statements. They're not on the fund financial statements. And then you have this nice little liability called pension liability and other post-employment benefit liabilities that's reported on the government-wide statement. So that's the main difference. But in my opinion, the fund financial statements are more important in the sense that's what you use to budget and so forth and so on. And then there's a ridiculous amount of required footnotes on pages 9 through 31. And then the last part is this required supplementary information. And all this is promulgated by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So they're the ones that are to blame for having a statement that's probably twice as long as it should be. So just, again, a little overview. Page 6, I just put together some highlights. Financial statements like these are difficult to dig through, but these are just some numbers I pulled out to show your total assets have increased, your total fund balances have increased from 2019 to 2020. Your revenues increased slightly, your expenses went down slightly. So as a result, you had a net increase of $347,000 for June 30th, 2020. So in the for-profit world, they would call that your net income. So I think just looking back, the city of Prospect has been fortunate to have surpluses rather than deficits, which is good. The next page, page 7, this is in footnotes, but I just wanted to break down what your fund balances are made up of. Your unassigned is $836,000. You committed, I think by prior council actions, an amount to be set aside for this pension and post-employment liability, which is not usual, but it's not a bad thing, because that is a liability that, eventually over many, many years will actually, have to be paid through higher contributions to the pension fund. You have non-spendable items because you've already spent it basically for prepaid expenses, and then you have your road fund. So, almost $3.2 million of fund balances. Just page 8, I call this the future. Laura did a really nice job in helping us get up to speed, helping us get everything we need. You have a clean audit opinion. But as I understand, I heard that you hired a new city clerk, and I think that's good. So I'm glad that there's not going to be a big lapse, but that is obviously a key role here. And that person is very instrumental in getting the audit done on a timely basis. You know, one of the things that we always talk about in smaller organizations, whether they be government, nonprofit, or for-profit, is when you have limited number of people, segregation of duties and attention to that is important. So we had some discussions about what that might look like. The theory here is that one person should do something and someone else should check it, and vice versa. So when you have a small staff, it's difficult, but that's just something to be aware of. This money from Washington that's headed to all the governmental agencies, we've had some discussions about, it can be used for certain things and not other things, and the guidance on that's not really clear. And the discussions they're having in Lexington, because we had one, a month or so ago. It's difficult to know how to spend all that money in the right way. So we've agreed to pass on any information we learn as we're going through this. And then the last thing is, rising pension costs. That liability is, on one hand, it's a fiction because it doesn't have to be paid right away. But on the other hand, it is an actuarially determined amount that as you progress into, 20 years into the future, more money will have to be paid in to keep up with these obligations. So on one side, people governments complain about, why do I have to book this actuarially determined liability? But on the other hand, it does recognize a real issue that not only you, but every government in the state is facing. So I think that's all I wanted to cover. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Yes, I have one, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Meyer. First of all, thank you very much. So my question on page 7, the 1.891 million for SERS, basically. So help me understand that a little bit. I thought that we reserved around 2 million several years ago.
Yeah, so your liability actually came down. So the liability is determined at the state level. They do one big report for all governments. It's really quite a report. And so that number is, and all the information in these footnotes is given out to the various governments. So your liability number came down about $150,000 from last year to this year.
I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, that's I think they've done some. I'm not an actuary, and I don't really know what actuaries do, but I think they did some tweaking of some assumptions. I don't know what else. Investment returns might have been better than first thought, or maybe they're
They jacked up the rate of surge.
Yeah, well, so that might be a fiction or it might be reality, but who knows? But
Well, and when we passed it, we did it so it would fluctuate. We knew that was going to happen. So next year.
yeah, that was our
it goes up.
understanding. So
In previous audits, if it was broken out into compensated absences, pension obligations, and OPEB obligations. And then last year, the year prior to this report, was 2,000,001. And obviously, it's come down. Is this being 891, so cover all three of those things? Or-
yeah, that's back on. Let's see, it's on page 19 of the actual financial statements.
And it's also true that that's a year behind. Not correct?
Yeah, so the actuaries are always a year behind on any actuarial data. So
that was at the end of 2019.
right.
Yeah. Okay. So we don't know what's happening in 24 here.
Yeah, and that's very common just on any actuarial report. It's usually a year behind, not just the government, but even for-profit organizations and so forth.
So that leads me to my
Yes.
question. When would we expect the 2021 audit?
Well, it'll be before June of next year.
Yes, we'll hold you to that.
So now I will say, your previous firm, we're familiar with that firm. Over the years, they've had a great reputation. I think they just had some transition issues, but we're well equipped. We have 80 people. We have a lot. How many people do government stuff? At least 25%, 30% of.
In the olden days, because you can tell I'm old, we used to get them in October. And that has not been the case for long enough, and it creates real issues. We would anticipate getting them in October and then looking at our expenses, and then very often bringing a budget amendment through in the beginning of January, because by then we can tell what's going on. And we have not been able to be that on top of things for a while.
Yeah, so again, we have a strong staff. We'll meet whatever deadline that's reasonable for you.
We'll just beat him if he's not ready. It's important.
Yeah, and we'll, I was glad to hear that you did hire somebody. We'll reach out to that person, introduce ourselves, and get to know him sooner rather than later, for sure.
Thank you.
There is time lapse, isn't there, the end of the year before you can identify insurance payments that should be in the current year?
Yes, right. Yeah, there's, it just takes a while to close the books out and to see what needs to be booked back as receivables and things like that.
Well, 2.5 months since getting this, we get this started, a remarkable job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question on page 7. When we look at the fund balances on that page 7, and I'm thinking about the new audit you're going to be doing. There won't be a future paving because we haven't yet, anyway, we haven't allocated money for that. But in terms of the pension, that amount of money, because it's committed, is not available for expenditure for the following year. And I'm also thinking that the road fund money is not available. It might be helpful if there'd be another line or something on this summary that would indicate something to that effect. Because people tend to look at it and say, oh, we've got $3 million, and that isn't what you're telling us.
Right. Yeah, so we're open to suggestions on how to present that.
Back to my point on the total obligation associated with pension, the compensated absences in the OPEB are not specifically identified in page 19. Are they there? I would appreciate it very much because I think they're meaningful to, at least to me, and hopefully everybody else.
Sure.
That what compensated absences in the previous years is $68,000. That's not a small sum. I think we should
Yeah, sure.
be looking at that. And the OPEB obligation, whether it's 461,000. So those are meaningful numbers.
Yeah, they're your financial statements. There's a lot of, even though there's certain requirements, there's a lot of flexibility in how we present things.
But I request
Okay.
that be broken up a little bit.
When you did the audit, and I guess it's more to you than it is to you, did you see any areas where we could improve what we're doing?
Yeah, so, we did have a conversation about segregation of duties and, it does help that you have an outside CPA firm that helps with the bookkeeping. You do have a separate set of eyes, but one thing that we, this audit was kind of I think we did a good job, but it was a rush to get it done and there was an urgency, but we all agreed when we had our end of the audit internal meeting with the mayor and Laura to, as we're going through this audit, make some specific recommendations on, if this person does X, this person do Y, and that type of thing.
So you're talking about something that relates to protecting people so that it doesn't, so one person is not doing both income and expenses and things of that.
Yeah,
Okay,
you don't want one person doing a complete
I hear you.
transaction without anybody
Looking at it.
So,
I hear you.
and you have so many different types of transactions that, we've committed to kind of look at each one and make some suggestions.
Very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, but overall, went good, and again, Mayor and Laura was helpful, and the other firms, was helpful in that, even though they really didn't have much to give us, they were helpful. They helped us with the prior year, the 2019 statement, so we would have kind of a good starting place. And, if anyone, on this council ever has any concerns, or, if there's anything that, you want to call me about, I'm glad to take the call, so. Just,
Actually, we hope to see you again soon.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for having us.
Reiterate.
No, thanks
Thanks so
very much.
Thank you. That's not all.
Yeah, I
Jennifer,
think it's
thank
an
you so much.
Still, you're right. I think it's an
Do we get to keep the bag?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
If you look at the old. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
That's,
I should remember that.
I don't want to be retrained.
Oh. No.
Yeah, we should.
Is there a motion to
No,
accept the
no,
audit?
keep leaving.
I move we accept it.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Audit is accepted. Next on the agenda is police report.
And the hearts follow the financial people. Okay, it looks like we can tell that COVID's officially over because the house checks jumped up 700 compared to May of last year when everybody stayed home. Really, really slow month for us.
It's good.
Only took 3 reports total, which is outrageous. No misdemeanor reports, only 1 felony report. And that felony report was a credit card fraud related. It was a forgery. But Officer Steve Hardy followed up on that, identified the suspect, went and talked to him, and the guy immediately already made restitution to the victim. And so they've already cleared that up. It's still pending because the victim doesn't know if they want to go forward with prosecution. So more than likely it'll be cleared, prosecution declined, but we don't know that for sure. But within just 2 or 3 days, he made all the restitution on the one case and admitted, within hours, he goes, man, I really messed up here. So good for him. Had no prior record at all. So just a one-time mistake, it looks like. Accident reports, pretty much normal for us. Nothing earth-shattering there. Dispatch runs were up just a little bit compared to before. There's only a couple of arrests for the month. They were both warrant related. In other news, Mary Ann Haverland, her father, who was 84, John Haverland, passed away last week on June 16th. A little unusual thing. I didn't know before talking to Mary Ann a few times in the last week how much we had in common. My dad was a state trooper and also had served in the Navy. Her dad served in the Navy and was a retired NYPD officer. And she also told me that she was able to wear the same badge number that her dad did. So at the time, and Mary Ann served with NYPD before she moved to Kentucky. So she actually sent me a picture of her dad and her sharing the same exact badge number. What an honor that must have been for both of them. You can just tell in the picture that they had how much pride that they both shared in that. So that was a pretty cool thing. Well, anyway, he was cremated rather, and he's born and raised in New York, lived there almost his entire life until he fell ill and moved to Kentucky last year to be with her. But anyway, they're returning his remains to New York, and I guess he's going to be spread at a number of locations per his wishes. So she's going to honor him in that fashion. So if you'll just keep her family in your prayers. Of course, we've got the 4th of July detail coming up. We'll do the same thing we usually do. We're not going to use the sheriff's department this year. I think we've got enough people on our own. We're just going to do it ourselves. I sort of like the idea of being able to do that because we have better control over our people than using somebody else's agency, because that's a little difficult for me to boss somebody else's people around. And they're all volunteers to begin with. And let's face it, in today's day and age, I would rather have the people that I know that are trained to the level that we expect. So, and then a couple of weeks later, we have the big swim meet up at the country club. That's the 15th through the 18th. It doesn't happen a lot. It happens about every 7 years. There are 7 different country clubs that participate. And we did it several years back. Obviously, actually, it's been 8 years. Hunting Creek was supposed to do it last year, but then COVID hit. They were supposed to host it last year.
But they've already done that, haven't they? Already done.
No, it's July 17th or July 15th to the 18th. It's next month. And the only issues we usually have is there's a lot of parking on the streets around it, but we do control that. We put the no parking signs out on one side, particularly around Foxcroft behind the back. That's usually where a lot of the parking occurs. But we will actually have a policeman at least dedicated during those hours to make sure that we don't have any other issues, and then to make sure that we don't have any problems with cars and stuff. Because there's a few times during the day that it gets really heavy, like Friday and Saturday, and then on Sunday night. And then there's the potential at the end of the day that all the cars are coming out Hunting Creek down to the light of 42, that we will have somebody down there to direct the cars out. It doesn't take long, actually about 20, 25 minutes and they're all gone. But it's a pretty good amount of people that get there, so. And we'll put on a good show for Prospect and make them look good. So. And then just on a personal note, I'd like to tell Laura goodbye on behalf of the police department. Thank her for her service. And, I'm in my 10th year here and I've worked for, I guess, 3 different people. And I'll tell everybody here that she's by far the best that I've worked. And she's just been terrific. She's done a terrific job. She's always been extremely helpful to us upstairs. Whenever we've had a question about anything, whether it be, HR type question, insurance related, any of the officers did, they would come down and talk to Laura. If she didn't have the answer immediately within an hour or so, she had the answer. And she is extremely thorough, very conscientious, organized, professional. And I think it's a tremendous loss, not only for all of us upstairs, because, we all worked with her. We know how good she was and what a tremendous asset. And I just think it's extremely unfortunate that this has occurred, and it shouldn't have occurred. She should have been treated better.
Any questions for Jeff? We move on into unfinished business, and it starts with the second reading of the ordinance dealing with the ad valorem tax rate. It's on your agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion to adopt that ordinance?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. So we will vote on the adoption of ordinance 607, 2021, an ordinance establishing an ad valorem tax rate for the city of Prospect for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022. Sandra, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Farnsell?
Yes.
Ms. Adele?
Yes.
Mr. Hulsman?
Yes.
Mr. Fulcher?
Yes.
Unanimously enacted. Next, we have the second reading of ordinance 608, 2021, an ordinance establishing a budget for the municipal road aid fund for the city of Prospect for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 21 and ending June 30, 2022. Is there a motion to adopt that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we'll start at the other end. Mr. Fulcher,
Yes.
Mr. Hillsman,
Yes.
Sedell,
Yes.
Mr. Forensic,
Yes.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mrs. Leonard.
Yes.
Again, unanimously adopted, which brings us into additional new business. Let's take them in reverse order. Ordinance 610, 2021, an ordinance enacting and adopting the 2020 supplement to the Code of Ordinances for the city of Prospect. Is there a motion to give that a first reading?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And is there any discussion?
You know, just a question, when we're voting for this, what are we really voting for? Because how would we know, except, how would we know if it's correct? I guess I don't understand. it.
Well, I do proofread the draft carefully when they sent it to me. But I mean, we pay American Legal for their expertise in formatting it and incorporating it correctly into our code. I mean, that's what the company exists for.
So are we voting to accept it or, okay, thank you.
Because, I mean, they're all ordinances we've already passed, so we're just accepting the incorporation into the complete code.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so this is just a vote to give it a first reading. Frank, how do you vote?
This is on 610.
Yeah.
Aye. Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Sandra.
Yes.
All right, would someone care to pull it up and just read the heading? Volunteers.
City of Prospect, Kentucky, ordinance number 610, series 2021, and ordinance enacting and adopting the 2020 supplement to the Code of Ordinances of the City of Prospect.
All right, it's now had its first reading and it will be brought up again at the next meeting for passage, hopefully. Which brings us to the last one, which is ordinance 609, 2021. An ordinance establishing a budget for the general fund of the city of Prospect for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021, ending June 30, 2022. Is there a motion? Give that a first reading.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there discussion?
I'll start it off. The budget last year, actually, the budget that we're in right now, that we worked on last year, I guess that was through the months of May through September, actually. Don't quote me exactly on that, but it was several months that we went through it. So just to voice a philosophy, there are things in this budget, excuse me, that are in there that are they're expensive, that are different than last year's budget. And even though last year we spent a good amount of time in going through the budget, we made no substantive changes in the final end result. But in this year, I'm advocating a philosophy of not looking at every line item at all, but certainly going through, and I think my fellow council member here is going to say something tonight about a process to use to kick it off. But just to go through those items that each one of us feels is important to discuss and have separate votes on, so that individually we all have a chance to give our opinions on that, and so that also the citizens of Prospect can hear our views and some of the things that are going on. So I just want to talk about that from a philosophy viewpoint.
The motion on the floor, which has been seconded, is to give the proposed budget a first reading, and your discussion is just fine, but that's where we are. Is there any other discussion?
Yeah, I'll speak. And thanks, Greg, for your comments. My view of this is that everybody on the council have a fair and full opportunity to express their views on the budget. I would encourage the council, to the extent they disagree with the mayor's proposed budget, that they make a motion to amend that portion with which they disagree. If there's a second, that we discuss that motion to amend and that we act on that. And if it's proper, I would suggest we do that to the extent we're able to this evening. And then we have the first reading of the budget as amended, and then have a second reading at the next meeting and either vote it up or down.
I think if there are any significant changes tonight, or I guess for that matter, if there's a special meeting, if there are any significant changes, that would require a second first reading. Am I correct?
I don't know enough to know. I would think that if we acted tonight, we could, that could be the first reading of this budget as amended this evening. But
I don't think so. I think he's correct. I think that the purpose of it is to let the population know what the budget is. And we'd have to come up with another, let me say it another way. We have always, anytime anything to an ordinance, and this is an ordinance, is significantly changed, that ordinance needs to come up changed for another first reading. That's been the routine.
Yeah,
practice.
Sandra's correct about that. I would just say this, that it depends what the change is. If it were to delete a certain item, not going to pick one, but that could be done here tonight. It depends what the item is. If it were related to employee compensation, that would be fairly complicated, and it probably could not be done tonight. So in my view, it depends what the change is. Some could be made right here on the spot, some could not, just depends.
Is that something we're able to lean on Chris for, or is
No.
the subjectivity is?
No, give an example, Laura, if they were to change something related to employee benefit or compensation.
Well, say you wanted to change the rate of the raises that were proposed for the police department. It's not just the pay, it affects FICA, it affects SERS, and it affects the bottom line in the entire police department.
Well, and it affects the balance of the budget too.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
So having said that, is there any other discussion about the proposed budget?
Well, I would like to see us go through line item by line item. Some of them are real irrelevant. Some of them, I think are very important. And I think that for myself, I haven't really had time to delve into these things, but serious concerns about the long-term effect of the compensation. I'd like to see some additional explanation in that regard, because I really don't think we should be in a position of mortgaging the future of the city if there's a way to avoid it.
There's I'm not trying to, anybody have a comment on that? I'm going to change the gears a little bit.
Do you want to stay on it and discuss it? Are we
No,
at that
I'm not.
point or no, no?
Actually,
No, I'm not.
Frank and I have not been party to any of the budget hearings, so this is new to us. And while you all may know what's gone into some of these things, we don't. I'm afraid I don't necessarily agree with Mr. Fulcher that we need to go line item by line item, because we'd be here in another 20 years. But I do think that we need to explain all of the major changes that have taken place since the last budget that we looked at. I have, for many years, I've been on this council and I did budgets just like all the rest of you big ones in my prior employment. And I have never seen a method of doing a budget like this one, because you have to look at it and say, what have they changed? And it makes it very difficult to try to get a grip on it in a short period of time.
Could I add to that, with all due respect to Mr. Folger, that would be a way of getting to everything, but just to throw this out, Laura, you know the budget perhaps better than anyone, and so are you prepared tonight? Could you lead us through the highlights of the changes between the current budget and the proposed, and could we use that? Is that okay? Could we use that as a way of ticking off?
I don't think I'm the person to do that.
Okay,
This is the mayor's budget, and they give his budget presentation
Okay.
last meeting.
well, I'll go ahead, Ben, and one of my concerns is the money that we are getting from the CARES Act. We're probably going to be giving most of that back.
No, not CARES.
I'm sorry.
The ARP.
So we're probably going to be giving most of that back. So where are we putting that money in the meantime?
As far as the ARP Act money, the 308,000 is the only portion of the total amount that's been allocated to Prospect that we can, with reasonable confidence, believe that we can actually spend. And that is the amount of using their formula, the state's formula, the federal government's formula, I don't know, somebody else's formula, as to what revenue we lost because of COVID.
For 1 year, right?
Right, for that one
That's
year.
what I'm understanding.
Yeah. So this, the 308,000 is not money we should have to return. That is money that we should be able to spend, without concerns.
I appreciate the pain you must have gone through to make the calculation. Is there anybody that we can run it through to see if we're doing the same thing as other small cities?
I mean, we're all using the same formula.
Yeah, we all got the same formula.
I know, yeah, but it's a very complicated, I appreciate the pain it must have been going through it. Other cities, a couple of other ones that I've talked to, are not putting an amount in their budget at this point in time. Hopefully, I think they hope it'll go up in the future.
I'm also hoping we'll be able to settle through your all's decision making and the new city clerk on who you want to continually run that calculation at the designated points so we can see what that revenue loss calculation is. Because you do it every year, but that way we would know who is doing it since we paid several different,
Well, right now, we're at reasonable
management.
confidence. What does it take to get to complete confidence? When we spend money in our checking account, we've got complete confidence. And when I'm hearing it's reasonable confidence, and so it begs the question, should we put $308,000 in our revenue appropriation with reasonable confidence?
I never have 100% confidence in anything. I'm
That's
always
a
prepared for the worst to happen, so.
Actually, the other issue attached to it, and it sort of goes along with what you said, this is one-time only money, and we're using it to balance possibly long-term continuing accumulating expenses. In other words, we may get this next year, but we aren't going to get it 2 years from now. It's not going to exist anymore.
That we should put it away. For a rainy day.
We're only talking about this year.
Maybe we should segregate it.
Are there any restrictions on this, Laura?
On using it.
Yes.
This is the money that there are no restrictions on, that this is money we qualified.
Basically, the thing is that, and Sarah can chime in on this because I know you listen too. this money in essence is to make up for lost revenue. And most of us will come up in the small cities that are well-run, and we're going to say, but we didn't lose any revenue. And there are a lot of reasons why we didn't. One is that things like property taxes are not immediately felt if they go down. The other may be that whatever our source of revenue is, has not declined in the period of time that we're looking at. And so they created this horrible formula that Laura's gone through. And it predicates everything on a 4%. And so even though you didn't lose 4%, you get to build in the concept that you lost 4%. And it doesn't use just 1 year. It picked up 4 years, 3 years?
If I remember, it's either the 4% for 1 year or the average of 3 years, whichever is higher.
Uh-huh.
Correct. Prospect, when we did, and it's the 3 years prior to the pandemic. And Prospect, when I did the numbers, I think we had like a banner year, the 3 years before the pandemic at like just above 1% growth, and then like 0.4% or something the next year, and point very less than 0.5% that next year. So Sandra's hit it spot on that it is that, and I don't care if it's 4.1% or 4%, but either way, you do your average growth or the 4, again, whether it's 4.1 or 4, whatever's higher. And so you almost have to take the words revenue loss calculation and in your mind go theoretical revenue, actual revenue loss, but from theoretical growth, that the assumption is Prospect would grow every year 4%. So that it works to our advantage. I hate saying that, but it works and it's compounded. Compound is not the correct word. I take that back. It's calculated every single year and you always calculate back to the base year, which is 2019. And so you're growing constantly. So you didn't grow 4% that year and you didn't grow 4% the next. Well, that's 8% you've lost. So you're always going back to 2019. So the number will continue. There's after learning that, there is a good chance that we will get close to the 1.2 based on our growth is not explosive.
Well, and it never has been.
But
And that's one of our.
correct, and it shouldn't be. That's not our thing. But it took a long deep dive in the presentation to realize that revenue loss, I had written that off, like not applicable, moving on. Yeah, so it was confusing but that is the avenue. And there are no restrictions on that piece from the revenue loss, which is good.
Because it's revenue loss.
Yeah, because they're like, hey, you would have spent it on infrastructure or you would have spent it on roads or whatever. Yeah.
So what are we saying regarding the three? No, that's good. So what are we saying regarding the 308K?
I really do think that it wouldn't hurt us to segregate it and to say that whatever we do with that money is one-time expenditure. It's not something that will go on for a long time. So
like that.
I don't
Tied to a
know.
project.
I like
Yeah,
that.
tie it to a project or to two projects
certainly-
or something.
We certainly have things to apply it to.
Mhm.
Okay, so are we in agreement? Do we need to vote on that then, or?
I have a question, but if we're wrapping it up, just on what your word, I should make sure I understand, segregate it, because I know they talked about they don't recommend you put it in a separate account for accountability, but I don't think it's what you mean, but can you
Yeah,
expand?
I agree.
So
That
that
is
I
it.
understand what you mean.
Just another category that it
Okay.
shows that it's.
Line item
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
Got it.
So John, do we need to vote on this or do we?
Well, what we've got at the moment procedurally is a motion to give this a first reading as it is. So the only avenue procedurally that I know to do anything else is by way of a proposed amendment.
No, we don't have to do that. First of all, let me say that my opinion, and that's all it is that this is not a substantive change. So I don't think at this point in time, we're talking about that. I think that if there's a consensus, that's fine. If there's a split on our opinions, I think we should vote so that we can see where everybody is on some issue.
Okay, that makes sense. Then I'd like to continue on. I've got a list, frankly, and we don't have to get them all tonight. But, well, let me go ahead and say, the US 42 study, I think that's a done deed. We are under contract, so we don't need to discuss that, do we? Go
But
ahead.
instead of getting to that, can we finish up with the revenues?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Question, why would we appropriate from surplus for paving if we have $308,000? Why wouldn't we use that if we're gonna do any paving?
Well, and then the other question is, why would we, what we did before was paving had not taken place for 2 years. And each of those 2 years, we segregated, we committed that money so that it wouldn't revert to the general fund and we would have enough to pave this last year. And that was 173,000. Is what we're saying here that we're going to take money out of reserves for paving for next year? And is this amount in addition to road aid fund? And what are we anticipating that's so expensive? Because for our paving, this is a very high amount of money.
Well, if you look at the, I don't know what page it is, but it's back in Public Works,
Page 13.
page 13, Laura says. You look at line 7512, this proposed budget contains $380,000 to pave City Hall parking lot expansion, Fox Harbor Road, Gunpowder Lane, Westover Drive, and part of Fairway View Court. So that's the 380 for paving that is in the proposed budget. And this, coming back to the revenue appropriations, this appropriation from this year's surplus is to use that surplus toward the paving.
Okay, one of the things that, there've been a number of us looking at paving for a while. One of the things that we learned this year was that when we were looking at a major street, like Hunting Creek Boulevard or Road, that giving us, the professionals have evaluated them and giving us an one amount of money for a very long street, one rating in terms of how bad or good the street is, was not prudent. Because when we drive around and look, for the example, at Fox Harbor, parts of Fox Harbor have been repaved within the last 5 or 6 years. And so repaving all of Fox Harbor doesn't make sense. A place where this came up this year, we ended up allocating money for Greenmere. Greenmere, at the point where it's been repaved, is a 2-lane street with a median. Only one small portion of it is done. The rating was for the entire street, which did not deal with the fact that this one part needed to get done. And the amount of money was for paving all of Greenmere, whereas what we did was significantly less. And so one of the things our group came up with was that next year, when the professionals go around and do the evaluations, that they take major streets and break them down into logical components, both for rating the quality of the paving and for giving us feedback in terms of dollars. In which case, it's very possible that this amount of money for what needs to be accomplished is not habitable. It's probably a lot higher.
The budgeted number is higher than what we'd end up spending.
I would think that it's significantly higher.
Then that would be a good thing. I mean, we would be saving money.
Well, we'd be saving money, but we're also allocating money that we probably could use in other places for other kinds of things.
Sure.
And I think that we do need to put some money into paving. I'm no trouble with that at all. But the bulk one of the things that came out loud and clear with all of what we did was that our roads compared to other small cities are in good shape. And part of the reason for that is that we do something all the time. We don't wait until something's cataclysmic to get it done. And so none of our streets were in the worst condition. The worst street we had was Bridgepoint Boulevard, and we did that. The whole thing needed to get done. And that was the largest expenditure that we had. And that was roughly what, I don't know, $58,000, was that it?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why I'm thinking Westover is very similar in many ways to Fox Harbor. There are parts of it that absolutely need to get done, and there are parts of it that truly don't. And so to some extent, I think this is overkill.
What, would you have a different number in mind?
How much? Could you quantify?
Would like to say that
I'd have to go
a
back.
month or 6 weeks ago, 4 of us went out and drove all of these streets with Al Binsfield. And we concluded that the 3 streets I've named plus half of Fairway needed to be repaved. Was our conclusion from one end to the other.
Okay, Al was one of the ones who did the evaluation, and he's very good at what he does. We didn't ask him when he did his evaluations for us, and we didn't ask Milestone, who did 2 evaluations for us. We did not ask them to break them down like we're talking about now.
We talked about that when we were with Al, and he agreed that they needed to be done from one end to the other. So that's why, big reason why it's in it. Anyway, the 380 is on page 13, and it is a big part of why the 245 appropriation from surplus to be used for paving is in there.
Well, John, I'm having trouble getting the numbers to add up because you just passed established a budget for the road aid fund. And I can't make the numbers meet the 380 plus the 50,000 for salt or for snow plowing and another 50 for another 50. So I get, the 380, really 480 in street maintenance. Of that, is what, 163 from the road aid fund. Is that included in the 245 or?
Where are you getting the 160?
The road aid fund ordinance is not reflected in this workbook. This is operational funds only.
But are we going to, okay,
Well, then it
but
doesn't.
we spend the road aid first. And I agree, we need salt, we need plowing. But we also can pay from that too.
But we have snow removal and salt in paving as part of the operational budget. In this budget here. But you're saying that's independent of the road aid fund.
Well,
So,
we spent 180,000 on snow removal this winter. And our road aid fund currently sits at, it's actually, I think it's close to 75,000, but we're anticipating having by the end of this year, at the start of winter, about 120,000.
It's right here.
So if we have another bad winter, we need to make sure we set aside operational funds in addition to what's in the road aid fund.
oh yeah, I'm just trying, I don't disagree with the need for the streets or the snow or the salt. I'm just trying to figure out in my own mind where there's $480,000 here in the operational budget expenditure and how that relates to the road aid.
They're two separate.
But the road aid fund that we just passed describes it, estimated expenditures for paving and snow removal. So we're
It goes for the
We're
probably
doubling
go
up.
to snow.
That's what I was gonna ask. If the thought was that 150K, that the paving couldn't actually be done.
Right. I
With the
mean,
funds, is that-
if we have a really, really bad winter, we'll spend all of it on snow removal. If we have a great winter, then we have more money for paving or to roll over to a future year for paving.
Well, I understand all that. I mean,
And
that's,
just because the council, if it does, authorizes spending that money, if we have a really mild winter, it doesn't mean we have to spend it.
I understand all that. Just trying to reconcile the
I
numbers.
understand too.
Okay, not the process. I agree. We need snow removal, we need salt, we need paving. But I'm trying to reconcile a separate fund. Is it the intent then that the 480 plus 150 will be spent in those three categories?
It's not 150, is it? It's 118.
Or at least to all be available to be spent on the street.
Yes, that's what we're budgeting. We're budgeting 480 plus 150 in those three categories. With this money to be spent first.
And we're taking it out of our reserves rather than out of our income.
That's right.
Okay, I guess that leads me to say, what are our reserves? Because when I look at the audit, which was certainly a year old, it only looks like we got 800,000 plus dollars. And yet when I'm adding up this paving money plus the one below it, I've got $893,000, which to me, granted, it's a year old, but it would be all of our reserves.
You're getting $800,000.
240. Well, the 308, but it's it's 585, 700 for the 245 and the next one, the 347. Those two together are approximately $600,000. And if our reserves have not appreciably changed since last year, that's it. That's the whole ball of wax.
Laura, what was your printed updated sheet on, because I think my understanding is the 245 is what you anticipate as our surplus from the budget we're in. And I've got so much paperwork here that your sheet is right in front of me.
Right, that's
Sorry.
what we anticipated when we did the work, but we think the actual surplus would be much higher.
680,452. You think that, okay,
It probably won't be that high.
Okay.
I think I'm being way too optimistic there, but 500,000 is probably a really
So
reasonable.
you think we didn't spend $500,000 this year that we budgeted for?
Well, it's not that. It's a combination of more revenue than we anticipated and less spending than we planned for.
so in theory, 1.4 million plus dollars from the uncommitted audit funds plus roundabout what we think is the surplus from the year we are closing out.
See, when I look at the Kelly thing, I can't come up with numbers that high. When I look at the May statement, I can't come up with numbers that high. Now, granted.
Yeah,
the
that
bills
went out
don't-
again.
The bills
I
don't.
can hear you
come
now.
monthly.
Okay.
I mean, I understand,
Keep it up.
like I
Thank you.
think you just paid paving bill. Yeah. But taking $600,000 out of our reserves is an incredible amount of money.
What line item does it say we're doing that, Sandra?
Well, it's right here.
Revenue.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
looking
right
at the
on
revenue
the-
budget.
okay, right here, the last, right,
245 and 340.
yes. So between the 308, that's one-time only money, and these two, we're at $900,000 that we're using to balance the budget that is not normal ongoing income.
Well, I know past performance is no guarantee of the future, but we've had a substantial surplus each of the last 3 years. We budgeted balanced budgets and we beat our expectations.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. I do agree that we've had those. But I don't They all are predicated on the needs of the city
Right,
and whether or not we do all the projects that are ever put in the budget.
right. And I would suggest, and I agree with John, I think paving these streets is a good use of our funds, and I think our citizens appreciate it. I've not heard any citizen complaints
I
about.
don't have trouble with that. I have trouble with taking it out of reserves.
Let me just finish my thought. I think we've got the money. I think we've got a solid budget, a conservative budget, and I think our citizens will appreciate us using the funds we've got to pave these streets and in future years, additional streets.
Again, I have no trouble with paving, and some of us have spent many years now recently working on paving. And I do think that we need to continue using professional engineers for the evaluation. And I'm glad that Al Binsfield went along with you because he's very good. But I also think that that money should come out of normal income, not special reserves. Because we'll always have paving needs. And once the reserves are spent, they don't exist anymore.
And we've had, Doug, we've had 3 good years in the winter without large paving and salt expenses. So that's true. That's a factor.
This year, yeah.
This year.
This year we went over, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, that's true.
But looks like we're still going to end up with a pretty good surplus,
Yeah.
which is good. I mean, that's good news, and I think it's reasonable to use those funds that we've got in a balanced budget to accomplish this substantial payment. And we, regardless of how we look at it, we talked about tying the $388,000 CARES Act funds to a project committed to paving. And that would solve that problem.
But then what would you do with this? Just take it out,
With what?
the 245?
No, I'd leave it right there. And we've got other needs that we've got budgeted and
With that, but why would you take them out of reserves?
well, this is the amount that's been proposed to take out of reserves. If we go through this and there are items that we remove from the expenditures,
Okay,
we can do it that way. None of us want to spend more money than we've got, but I don't think that's what we're going to be doing.
well, I can't wait till they do the next thing because trying to figure out what our reserves really are because of the flow of money is really difficult.
But we know we've got money in the bank. We know that.
But it's not unused money. It's not just sitting there. It's not the way our income flow is. It's not money that we could never get down to zero. ever.
But if we look at fiscal year, the money in our checking account in the SES account last year, total cash and compared to this year, and look at the difference, that would be a good indicator of how much money was to be saved in operations this year.
Except we'd have to take out the CARES money
Wow.
because that's one-time only money.
So
We've still got it.
So we use it for one-time expenditure and
Exactly.
paving these major
Exactly.
streets.
I don't have to look at that.
I mean, right now, we're on the May 31st, 2020, Kelly King reconciliation, looks like we got about 3.7 million.
Okay, except that again, some of that is already committed money. It's committed because of the pension and it's committed because of the other things on the
We
line.
just heard only 0.8 million of that's committed.
Well, and they've got a couple of other items down there too.
That's a
I
couple.
think
of
they were
them.
only like thousands, though. I don't think they
It's-
were hundreds
it's
of
not
thousands.
significant. So it looks like,
But see, that's a year old. I mean, that's.
no, this is May 31st.
No, no, I mean, this is. And that's part of the issue. We keep dealing with old numbers and it makes the budget very difficult.
Why don't we begin looking at expenses? Maybe the problem will solve itself. What I would suggest is if somebody's got a concern about some of the budgeted expense items, let's address those concerns.
That sounds like a good idea. Could I go ahead and, excuse me, so sorry. Ohio Valley crud. So, let's talk about the parking lot. That has been in our wish list, on our wish list for so long. And so I'd like to keep it in there. I was wondering if everybody felt the same way.
Right now, it's a hypothetical amount, but I think all of us agree we need parking. But I also think that we're skipping a lot by getting to maintenance projects instead of dealing with things like salaries.
Let's talk about salaries then. So before the meeting, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. I'm talking so much. Frank and I can share this one. I'd like to pass this down the line. This I got from Laura. These are just to kind of get us on the same page with salaries. So, so when you get this, you'll see two columns. One column would be the increase rate percentage that was initially in the budget, and that,
We came up one short, right?
I'm so sorry, there should be,
I can share with the mayor.
and I might not have made enough copies. So if we could just share, so the first increase took place, that was applicable from July 1st through the end of the year, and then a new rate took effect on January the 1st. It carries us through to the end of this fiscal year. So you can see that not everybody was exactly the same, but you can see, kind of give you an idea of what, if you had the two columns together, what the total percentage increase was for this year. So let me hyperlink from that. I just wanted you all to have that as a background to the current proposal, and I am so sorry, I don't have that right in front of me.
Page 16.
Thank you, John. I thought I had the detail of it though, too. That's what I was really looking for. So, okay, thank you, John. So we have the percentage increases there. No, John, wait a minute. I thought we had, were some people in the 3% category? Oh, yeah, there's 5%. Here we go. Yeah, there was, so it wasn't just 2% across the board. Yeah. So there was a 3% in there for one of the people and a 5% in for one of the people.
So
So,
that's because the 3%er picked up some additional duties. And the 5%er is our new code enforcement.
okay.
And he's bringing in a lot of revenue.
So, so any discussion on that relative to the cost of living increases, the percentage that's gone up? How does everybody feel about this salary increase?
Well, actually, there's another way of looking at it also. And that is, I took this ordinance and I compared it to the one that we passed in September of last year. The administrator's salaries alone, not any of the benefits, have gone up 93,000. This is 93,000 higher than the one we passed last September. The police department is 305,000 higher, and the maintenance department is 67,000 higher. Those are round figures. They're actually higher than that.
Is that just wages or is that
That's
salary?
just wages. It's just that line item. And when I look at all of that and divide it out, that is a substantial amount of increase over a short period of time.
Well, it looks like the proposal is 0.6 or 0.7% above inflation. It's a pretty nominal.
But it isn't if you look at it over a year. It's huge. That year's inflation was roughly 1.4%. It's going certainly higher now. But over time, over 1 year, it's way more
Right.
than that.
But I think it's a good point to say, I think we all agree we're moving into a period of more substantial inflation.
But we shouldn't be anticipating inflation.
I'm not,
Salary
I'm just saying,
increases follow inflation. They don't anticipate.
yeah, and I don't disagree with that, but I do think it's reasonable to propose for us to support, if we do support, 2% increases with this budget and our revenues in the face of the ongoing, the inflation we have experienced.
Sandra, do you mind, just, my brain is torn in two directions. I agree with the 2%, but my brain, I'm trying to follow the 300K increase for the police. Do you mind pointing me?
What I
Because I'm
had was
missing.
ordinance 591, 2020, and I just took the amount off of that.
591 from 2020.
Right, and that was the one we passed September 8th. Yeah, I was surprised at that too.
You might, yeah, it looks like, or I might have to look it up, because I know, at least on the sheets here, it's a $45,000 increase. But
What can be is that what goes into, because they're not exactly the same. It could be that what goes into the lines are not apples to apples. That's
Well,
what
I know, yeah, well, Rick, we can use names, right? Yeah, but Rick, I know got added into the police force. So I know there's a whole salary that got added there. I know a part-time got hired. So maybe that's included in,
But then the
all of
administration would
that.
have gone down and it didn't, it goes up.
sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I follow what you've got, but without that document, I don't.
Under Administration General Government, 5111 salaries, we had 2021 budget of 174,822 and 2021-22 budget of 183,230.
Okay, but I think you're gonna find this includes the salary increases that were included in the last year's activities.
One thing that's going on with the police is the recommendation that we received to increase the hours for part-time officers.
Is it okay to have the chief chat about that? Because I
think that.
happened to be around when you did chat about it, and I did not understand it beforehand, and then I understood it. Would that be something that you're okay chatting about, the increase in the?
Recommended. Days. That's the increase. 600. 8 hours a month. It's not necessarily salary. It's more work. Because over the last year, I frequently get calls, some of which come from you. We would like to have more of an increase on traffic enforcement along 42 and way for me to do that. That actually, another day or several days within that month, per day, post them up and down 42. And that's their sole function. They're not during past checks, during their entire shift. And so there'd be somebody out. We don't like people just doing, if they're by themselves, doing traffic stops and everything. It's the same issue. You got somebody out there doing that. And you can't do it late at night. So those days during the in between 2 o'clock at night, you out there in 42 to have it's a nice safe way to do it because they would be a part of the regular patrol function. Just put them out there and handle those kind of duties because I've been asked over the last year or so to increase traffic. That's a safe way for us to do. And it doesn't detract from what we're doing. It's the house watch is such a popular thing. The only other way to get all these other traffic duties is to take away. Just on them.
Well, right now, house watch, it's, someone's listed as a house watch, that house is watched three shifts a day.
Minimum.
Do you need 3 shifts a day? I mean, do you need 3 looks a day to have a secure house watch?
I think that comes from us, though, right?
That's what I think. Just add, if it's on your shift, if it's basically the way I look at it, that's your fee for 8 hours. And if that's on there, then you should at least drive by that house once a day during your shift to check it. The guys during the day shift, they physically get out of the car. They walk around the house and they'll tell you who's got buddy backwards. Because you look at the floors upstairs. And that will tell you all you need to know about who's out in house watches. And in particular, there's a house up here on Fox Valley.
because of how muddy and everything is in the back, slippery it is. And those people actually got the cameras, so they know when the police are. And we get frequent calls. So during the day, they physically get out, and it's marked a certain way. They all keep a log sheet. And every house, when you go into this collection, it issues you a number, 4-digit number. And so they don't write the address in every single house. Because there's pages and pages of household. And so they issue a 4-digit code of the house that they check and the time that they check it. And then they'll either mark in like WA means walk out, means they physically got out of the car and checked. Or in the meetings, like right now when it's dark, drive, just with a TV on it, and we'll shout it along. Pull in the driveway, things like that, because of, you know, particularly the late ones. 1 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to get out and walk around the house at night. That's the way I see it. And another thing, if you go to look at those, you'll also see that the guys in Lake Lots, they drive by and they see that somebody's left their garage door open. And so they leave a notice at their front door and say, hey, you left your garage. Or somebody's in a home on the door. And we'll see 3 or 4 posts every shift.
Yeah, I got one of those.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't last, it was last year. I opened the I opened the door and I looked and in the back of the garage door was white. And I didn't see it, so I thought, you know, the door's down, but it wasn't. And so I called him for that for a couple of days.
I look at the neighborhood's website or social media every now and then, and the near as I can tell, the highest crime area in Jefferson County is Norton Commons.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, and it's because
There's a lot of petty crime.
Yeah, there is.
Incorporated.
Yeah, and I think we.
And the other one is up here in Oakland County in Goshen.
Yeah, and I think
I'm really happy about break-ins to homes and very, very low.
And that's where I was going.
Well, the people who do the breaking in talk to each other and they tell them, don't go to Prospect because
The
of
ones that we had, I mean, in 10 years that I've been here, I bet you less than 5. True stranger. Some of the other ones, they've been people that work on.
Yeah.
We had one that, he didn't just went to court on, this guy was in the area. There's a house on Westover down in the north, so 2 sets of dollars out of the garage. And he was working on a pool at Chestnut Hill in Westover. But he partook of some golf clubs out of the garage, like 3 doors down on the west. And lo and behold, he got the clubs back and then 2 weeks, he worked on that case.
the communities next to us, like Norton Commons, they have a lot of crime.
They do. Well, and that's a nice feature that we have. Where I can see everything for them. Right. But it's also every little thing. They got papers that call, take everything. So they got what's called free total. So a lot of what you see is based on time. But it can be anything and everything. It's there. Which is basically if somebody. That's from far. There's also a lot of construction that is going on over there. And I guarantee you that a lot of the stuff is being reported are thefts from construction. That is always big. Once this gets up and running over here, she's gonna regret closing those gates.
Folks, I'd like to throw something out on the salaries. I think most of you, if not all of you, know that the last budget review that we went through, I was a proponent of giving the maximum salary, and in the end, we actually did that. Everyone got at least 2.25%, some higher. So I felt like this time that made us whole. So now I'm looking at what is the cost of living? And we're not in inflation yet, and I don't think we should give a raise based on a worry that we think might happen in the future. We can always amend the budget and tweak it and fix it if we have to. So I'm a proponent of going, and you can take the higher of the two. I'm a proponent of going with the cost of living as it is stated, 1.4%. Then going for that, because there's so many things
Okay,
that,
but you have to deal with a time frame.
I'm sorry.
You'll have to deal with a time frame because if it is 1.4% in X year, whatever the year is,
Right.
on an average, we have already in that time frame given roughly 2.5% or whatever, you know, that's the document that was just passed out.
Good, that's an excellent point. And I was just trying to get to a number that, because I see so many things that are going to be a factor of the salary, the benefits and so on. And Sandra and I are working on the personnel policy. And we see, it's a great concern of mine. Because there's going to be a rippling effect from this, and it's going to be an expensive thing for the city. So I just don't want us to get in too deep. I'd rather err on the side of caution now. Of course, I want all of our employees to have a great salary, and they are well compensated. It's not that they aren't, but so what would you propose then, Sandra? Do you have a figure in your mind?
Actually, what I propose is that I hate to ask you for this, but if we could have dollar amounts that deal with what we're talking about, this is very helpful because we can look at a position. But you and I right now don't know if we do a 1% or a 2%, how much money that really will cost the city in a year.
1% would be half of the 2%.
Yeah.
Can I,
Yeah, it would. But right now, we don't know what that is.
can I throw out just one point of reference and one data point? The cost of living numbers, they came out in January. If you look
correct.
here on page 16, the consumer price index increase from January 20 to January 21 was 1.37%. I just looked up May CPI increase, 5%.
I know.
Really?
Yeah, and it's on here, April 2020 to April 2021, 4.15%.
Yeah.
So we're already there.
But that's only for 1 month. I mean.
No, that's.
Yeah.
Well, they annualize it based upon a month.
Right.
Right, that's annualized.
That's it.
But it doesn't mean that,
January.
right, it doesn't mean that took a
It's
year
a
to.
big change for
Right.
management.
Now, just in case, because it sounds like there may be a budget amendment request coming up from you two here in a second, so I did have one little thing to say, just in case that was where we were headed, is something to think about is we, as a city, spent a lot of money last year that only the police department basically allowed us to do, and that's from the CARES Act. So it was only because we have the police that we were eligible to get the $400-something thousand, and that we were able to spend it. And they were out there when I didn't leave my house, or, you know, when I was bathed in hand sanitizer. They were the ones still going to cars or homes or interacting. And so I would just say we maybe be mindful, or at least I'm very mindful of, and I know it's only 1 year, but that was a hard year. We can always reassess later, but a lot of the money we're getting is because those guys did what they did and showed up every day. And that's the same for Public Works. And it's actually the same for you all. So
That's true,
This
but
is a
again,
tough
we're back
year.
to the one-time money and the ongoing expense. And the other factor that we haven't talked about is how our salaries look in comparison to comparable cities in this local area. And we have nothing right now that tells us that our X is paid the same as the X in a similar city.
Well, I know we're on a bit of a time thing. I don't know if it's appropriate or if you guys are comfortable with, because it sounds like unless, I'm only stepping if you have your calculator out, is unless you had an idea of a number you wanted to propose, but if there's a show of hands of, hey, do we want to change it, just to get an idea, just to see how, you know, how far down this road
Well,
are
I
we
think
going?
if we had a dollar amount, that would give us something
Well,
to start
I
with.
have two other comments. Number one, I think we've never baselined any of our salaries. I mean, we have this amorphous number that we think is good. We all think it's good. Maybe some think it's great, some think it's not enough, it's too much, but we don't know. But there's the data available to say that job X in in our peer group, these are the ranges that are being paid for similar circumstances. You can take any number and add 2%, 3%, 4%. That doesn't mean we're doing the best we can for our constituents. We just don't know what the right base number is. Every time we come in here, oh yeah, cost of living, CPI, okay, add 2%, 3%, 1%, 0.5%. But what we're adding it to has never been examined. And that's a concern of mine. And as we go forward, the benefits in here, I don't know, and maybe you can tell me what is this based on? Is this based on the current employee manual benefits, or is it assuming some changes?
In terms of just what the policy says of general benefits we provide, the policy says that we provide 100% of health insurance, we provide life insurance. I believe it says that as the budget permits, we may cover dependent health insurance. I know in previous years, we have paid 100%. Currently, we only pay 50%.
Okay. How is that reflected in the numbers that we're looking at here?
Well, just the fact that they're there, that we are budgeting money for health insurance and life insurance, 50%.
Yes, but it's in here.
It's not encompassing any of the proposed changes in the, I think that's what you're asking, that the highlighted stuff, which it's not.
It's not in the salary increases. It's in, outside of payroll increase.
Yeah, but we haven't passed the personnel policy, so I
We
don't
don't have
think any
anything
of that's in here. Yeah.
We're not on the projecting.
That's specific,
It's current day personal policy benefits
yes.
is in this.
We got a proposal from the mayor. I would encourage or invite people who think it's too rich to make a motion to amend it to whatever they think percent they think would be appropriate. We can consider that.
One option is we had an increase January 1, 21, would be in January 20, and then another or July 1, 20, and then another January 1, 21. So there's been two, this would be a third increase in 6 months. Would it make sense to keep the 2% and given the cost of living, recognize the cost of living is going up? And it's going up in areas that affect people, like gasoline and cost of food. And it's, instead of making it the increase on July 1, maybe make it October 1 and keep it at 2%.
Just to that point, Don, just ballpark, it's like $25,000 at 2% is the increase. I'm just
That
concerned.
includes all three categories of employees?
Yeah, it does. It's just real quick math now. But
Does that include benefits?
no,
Just salary?
that's too complicated for me to figure.
It depends on what you're talking about. But if you can add sometimes roughly 40%.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good way to do
And
it. Yeah.
that's not accurate, and I won't
Right.
pretend it is, but
I've
it
heard
gives you a rough idea.
Yeah, that's a real good point. Well, back to Don's point then, do we want to go ahead and decide, because this is a big issue. Do we want to go ahead and put a number on it, a percentage on it?
Well, here's the thing, we have a motion to adopt or to give a first reading, motion and a second. Give a first reading to the budget proposal. Okay, and now we've been discussing it for some length of time. If there is a motion to change something, I'd say it's time to make the motion to amend what's been presented. And
But we haven't begun to deal with all of the issues. This is only the beginning.
I think he's only talking about the salary, the right?
Yeah.
I think
Whatever-
he's saying
whatever
a
the
single.
motion is, whatever-
So you think we should vote on the salary?
Well, I think we should vote on whatever motion to amend anybody wants to make. That's what I think, whether it's
Have that done and
salaries
move
or
on.
something else.
Yeah, then consider the next issue.
Okay.
I would, I think Sarah's point about the police in particular is very pertinent to this point, and even to the point of deferring an increase. Without the police, we wouldn't have received the funds that we received under the CARES Act, or we wouldn't have been able to spend those funds.
We wouldn't have gotten them.
We wouldn't have gotten them. They have, and I think Sarah made the excellent point. I have been in my office probably a total of 10 times in the past year. The police were here every shift, every day, doing all the things that they've done. They didn't work remotely. So I would be hesitant to suggest to them that, that they wait an extra period of months before they realize a fair increase in their compensation. If I were in their shoes, I might take umbrage at being asked to wait when I served, as I served in the past year, and when I'm the one, what we did was responsible for substantial funds coming into the city through the CARES Act. And I think, I spoke about the virtues of paving earlier. Paving's nothing. Public safety is everything. So I'm very reluctant for us to try to parse this too closely to save money. And I agree with the point about whatever we do is projected into the future. We do 2% here, we do 2% next year, or depending on inflation, we do 3%. I know that's on top of what we did this year, but all things considered, and given the importance of public safety and the great track record we've got here, and I hear it from people who live here, how much they appreciate, how fortunate we are to have the police protection we got. So I would be very much in favor of the mayor's proposed budget on that. Having said that, I respect the other points that have been made. I think a motion to amend is something we could consider and discuss and vote on.
I'd like to ask one question before we do that. You're keenly aware of what other people are paying. And we know that a lot of other small cities either are contracting with an organization that tends to use retired police, or they're using Metro Fox. How do our salaries in your mind stack up with those?
We fallen behind somewhat. Example, I was told that even pretty similar to us, maybe in terms of paying more than that's what we hired. Previously hired and already started that, so they're hired in. Certainly, plus they get us any phone call. That's worth at least $1,000 a year or more as a benefit. So we're definitely behind them. In terms of part-time, St. Matthews is starting out their part-timers at $33 an hour. Now, I know that we can't compete with St. Matthews in terms of the tax base or anything like that. But that's what they're starting theirs out.
And where are we starting?
We're at 28 now, and I'd propose that we go to 30, but that it fell short of that, and it just went to a regular percentage. So we're going to be considerably short of 30. I've been told that Metro is getting 10 this year. They're getting a 10%.
That's not all decided yet.
Yeah.
Well,
I bet they will, but they've been without one for a few years, which is typical of the way they negotiate every contract. But they're losing them so fast. That's the reason that they're having to.
yeah.
That's not in a number of cities, bigger cities.
Yeah, they're having to do it because they don't, but their package of their
benefit packages are horrible there. That's why they can't keep anybody. They're losing people to U of L, and they make $20,000 a year less.
Wow.
But they're losing them because of the benefits cost them that much more. If you've got a child or whatever, they pay almost $2,000 a month for healthcare.
They're finally.
Benefits are important.
Guns.
Yeah.
Finally.
Well, since I brought this up and in light of the new information that Laura provided on the more recent CPI and in light of what Doug has said and what the chief has just said, I'm happy with the mayor's budget on salaries.
Chief, did you mentioned that you had broached the subject of the disparity in salaries between what we offer and some others. John, why wasn't that included in your proposed budget?
Because, it's hard to find somebody that actually prints that out and writes it down.
Yeah, I agree.
These other cities, they're very reluctant to do that.
We're trying, we're going to
It's,
try.
it's,
and get
it's
that.
difficult to do that because it's a hard thing. They'll all give you the cost of what they pay a rookie coming in, but it's the lateral transfer in that benefit package is difficult to pin down. And the other variable is whether or not they have to pay into SERS.
Yeah.
Because there's a percentage depending on the size of the department. There's only the number of people that you can hire, whether or not on a year-to-year basis, like we're doing here for some people, we can only have 5 here because of the number of people. Because we're 25 or less. Departments that are more than 25, there becomes a percentage basis. So they can have more than 5 on that year-to-year contract letter, which saves the city a ton of money. You can go back and look when I first got here, what we were paying for all of the people, because we had to pay SERS for me, for Todd Shaw when he was here, plus the healthcare benefits, and the healthcare benefits were really high too. Well, you got to where you don't have to pay for my health insurance. You don't have to pay for into retirement for me, for Tony Denham, and for 3 others. Now, the only ones that we're currently paying on are, well, Jill, the secretary, and then Mike Thomas and Mary Ann. Now, when either of those 2 people leave, we can't hire another one in on contract because we've already reached 5. So the other 2, that anybody that would replace them would have to come in and we would have to pay SERS. Now, the difference is that instead of paying at the hazardous rate, we can pay at the non-hazardous rate because it doesn't make any difference because they can never collect on that to begin with. So that we just ensure that they pay into the system. So instead of paying what is the hazardous rates, 40% now?
30.
Yeah, it's pretty close to 40%. And then the non-hazardous is, probably 12, 13% lower than that. So at least you get a lower rate. So that's beneficial.
Well, back to my earlier point, fair compensation is something that we all strive for. If we're not meeting the market on the low side, then that should be incorporated in our budget. That should be our baseline.
Yeah.
If we can just substantiate. The same with the other areas of the administration, et cetera, that we don't know. We just don't know anything about what a city clerk, administrator, mayor.
I will tell you the one thing that has kept us in pretty good shape, even though we're not quite as competitive on the salary, is they like working here. Because of the fact that everything is so much more low key, they don't have to deal with a lot of the craziness. It's a really low crime rate. People here treat them pretty well. And so, I mean, we've hand selected
They
the
like it here
people that
for the
we
same
have.
reason
They
we like it here.
like it here.
That's true.
We get along pretty well. And I mean, people call me. I get calls here saying that they want to come and work here. And they can make more money elsewhere, but there's also, you buy into a lot of headaches as well.
Positive environment.
So, I mean, there's a lot to be said for making $5,000 less and being happy someplace.
Yeah.
I'd like to continue a lot of this discussion when we get to like the personnel policy, but if it's all right, because I know Greg mentioned he's good with two, I know I am, and Doug, you mentioned it.
And
but
actually,
if there
if
isn't
we
a
do-
motion, I'd
If we
like
do
to,
the two, I agree with you.
Yeah.
We will be roughly at $30 an hour.
yeah, just
We're
for,
very close. So I agree with both of you.
With the police, just, are we talking about police or overall?
I think we're talking about everything.
I think we're talking, yeah,
Yeah,
there,
it's
yeah,
pretty much overall. There's
Yeah.
a couple of exceptions out there. Shoot, I left a piece of paper on there.
But the exceptions have already been explained.
Yeah, there's a 3%, there's a 5%. I think we're okay with those. Everybody else is too.
yeah. So if there isn't a,
Is there another expense item that's causes that we need to discuss?
Yes, we need to get into healthcare, but before we do that, John, can I just ask a procedure question? Because I just don't know the answer to this. So we have a first reading that's been moved and seconded, so we're in the discussion phase. And I'm not in any hurry to go. I'm happy to stay as long as we need to stay. It's only 9:20. It's only 9:20. That might seem really late to some.
I still have bathroom breaks if you want.
I don't go to bed till 11 or 11:30, so I'm not gonna do anything anyway. But anyway, if we don't get through this tonight, procedurally, what happens? We're not going to vote on it, or are we? Do we vote on what we've already discussed and then we come back? and-
No.
How do we do that?
It's a motion which has been seconded to give first reading to the budget as I presented it. We're discussing that.
Right.
If anybody wants to make a motion to amend them, then that will be discussed and voted on. That's the procedure.
Okay.
Now, Laura, what?
I just want to say that this isn't procedure necessarily, but there has to be some closure on the health insurance tonight because I have got to get signed documents into KLC.
That's
So
important.
our employees will have health insurance come July 1st.
Is everybody good to move to chat about that now?
Let's go to
Is that
health.
okay?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, let's jump in.
Yeah, I went back and looked at health insurance last year versus proposed budget, and it looks like the health insurance changes we made by going to what the Cadillac program is going to cost us about $12,000
For all employees.
for all employees.
Don, would you please say that again? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I catch it.
I went back to this document, health insurance last year, health insurance this year. And it's the administration's 3478 higher, police 4093 higher, public works 4432 higher, for a total of $12,003.
Okay, can somebody tell those of us who are part of the budget discussion what the change is?
We're going with a different health insurance policy. For at least 12 years now, we have been on a high deductible policy. And to supplement the high deductible policy, the city has also purchased HRAs, health reimbursement accounts, or health savings accounts. It depends on the individual, and put money into those to be used to help pay for specific health-related expenses.
When you say high deductible, what was it?
Sorry,
What was the high deductible?
currently it's $2,700 a year. And that's for an individual. We do have a couple who have dependents on the policy as well. Okay, well, that's for next, right?
Is that this one right here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we are proposing moving to a PPO, which has a $100 deductible. And then the city, in the proposal, the city will continue to fund, there'll be HRAs for everybody at this point. But for those who are on a health insurance policy, it's going to be a smaller contribution. And then for our retired police officers, we will continue to give them the same amount as we've been doing the past several years. So that's the total package.
But if they're not on a health insurance policy, why are we?
Because of their status, they're not eligible for benefits, and giving them the HRA is pretty much one of the only benefits we can give them. And as the chief has explained, many of them really do depend on it.
So the health reimbursement account, HRA, well, that, okay, so first of all, two questions, Laura. So our current policy is, well, excuse me, it's the HSA 275. That's the one in yellow here that I guess everybody has it. So that's costing us 76K a year. Is that right? About that. So I don't worry about the change. And then you're proposing to go, or John's proposing to go to a PPO, and that is basically going to be the same amount, 76K, right?
I think the total cost is a bit higher than that.
All right, did you change the HR?
Okay.
Did you change the HRA? Maybe I don't.
Right. We did, in the budget committee, we adjusted the HRA contributions. It would be $1,250 for those who are getting the health insurance and $1,900 for the 5 police officers.
Now, so what did that put us to after that change? How much money?
I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe it was in the 80s.
86?
Yeah, if you add 12 paid from now.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have so many things.
So it's going up $10,000. So I really like the fact that if it were me, I would really love the HRA and the PPO, the fact that the deductibles are so much lower. That would be attractive to me. My only concern is how much money we're putting on, that's how much money is going on the card, right? The 1,900?
Again, the 1,900 is just for people who don't get the health insurance.
Oh, I see.
It's $1,250 for those.
1250 for everybody to do.
When you say PPO, it used to be Preferred Provider Organization. What does it mean now?
I think it's the same.
Yeah.
I don't think that.
Okay, but does that mean they can only go to network providers?
I think you could go to somebody who's out of network, but the co-pays increase because there are co-pays with the new policy that we don't have or yet currently don't have with the high deductible.
Preferred Provider Organization.
Okay, that tends to work in large metropolitan areas because it tends to be a problem for people in more rural areas because everybody near you may not be within the network. And we haven't come up with anything like that to be a problem.
That's a good point.
Well, we are in a large metropolitan area and it certainly won't affect me.
Yeah, I was thinking about you, to be honest, yes.
Doesn't matter for me.
So you have,
Sorry.
no, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't know the exact answer to that, Sandra, but I know, because I've seen the discussions with Ron and Laura about it. At least individually, they have taken into account the knowledge of their employees, that's a problem, their employees.
We kind of did, asked around, say, how do you feel? These are the options. What do you think? So poll them, I guess you could say. And I think there seems to be a general understanding is that this could be like a 1-year experiment. And if it just doesn't work, either from the employee perspective or from the city's perspective, we can go back, we can reconsider it. But after 12, 13 years, we wanted to try something different.
It was described as a Cadillac.
PPO is not a Cadillac. I mean, really, it is.
Does I feel like I'm being pushy, I don't get it to be, but does anybody, people have spoken highly about it, does any,
But you're paying
Frank, we haven't heard from you
$12 yourself.
on it, I don't have your thoughts on it, I just.
No, you're paying them pre-tax. So I'm with that.
Just want to make sure, I don't want to cut it.
I've got, we put in $8,000
Right,
here
no, I
in our
don't.
HSA. It's our money.
Yeah.
It goes in there, it's pre-tax.
I understand it, but
Yeah.
So
No, I-
that's
so
that's
that's
a Cadillac plan.
So that's your only benefit.
I didn't,
That's the-
I wasn't involved in
Um,
the
Yes.
discussion, so.
Yes, and then once you reach your deductible, you get more of a more traditional.
Okay.
So where are we on the?
Well, the only
what we were chatting
concern,
about.
the only concern I have is, I love the plan, and that's the one I would choose if I were an employee and I had the choice. I would love that plan. The only concern I have is the amount of money on the card. And I asked the question, I forgot the young lady's name, Jessica. I asked the question, what can those monies be used for? And I think the answer was, so glasses, prescription drugs, but they had to be medically related. It couldn't be something else.
Pack of cigarettes.
Yeah. So,
Actually, we asked that question a year ago, and that was not the answer. The answer was that if it was not related, that they would generate a tax form and taxes would have to be paid on the amount of the expenditure.
She has
Was not
updated that. It
Not,
gets
not on the
declined.
HRA. They
No,
reject it.
That is
On the
actually.
transaction, you get a rejection.
Okay, that's the HSA, not the HRA.
No, they are extremely strict. If there's even the type of doctor that they don't recognize, you have to submit your EOBs, your explanation,
that's right.
and follow up. Yeah, I have
That's what you do.
I've had to send them
the-
stuff. So like
before
my
they
wife went to a
reimburse.
different kind of eye doctor.
Yeah.
So-
And, geez, I had to send them War and Peace and they finally.
So, does that accumulate every calendar year? If you don't use the 1250, you know, chief, if you don't see.
It does roll
It
over.
rolls over.
It does roll over, but most of, like our guys upstairs, they use every bit of it. So it's gone before the following July. Like, for example, we had one officer whose son gets a pretty rare medication. And it's basically shot in one swipe of the card.
See, that's my only
1,900
concern is, I feel like the policy is better. And so that you'll need less money for co-pays and co-insurance. And so that's my only concern is putting too much money on the card, which is a cost to the city. So that's my only concern, but I don't know what it should be. But it was 1,008, wasn't it?
It's been 1,900 every card for the past at least decade.
Laura, is there any way to know? Do our employees use the card every year for the most part? Is
Many-
anybody rolling over to a big number?
My understanding
I,
is,
because I don't have that many medical expenses, but most people do use the card pretty early on in the year.
But now when you terminate, you lose that?
Actually, no, because I'm on an HSA, whatever's left on my card, I take with me. You know,
Right.
I still can only use it for medical expenses, because it is an HSA, but yeah, that's.
that's the same.
That's good. It's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Laura, we were
I'm
paying
on the
1950.
HRA, so
I've got
the time that I walk out the door, whatever
What's the
left
size?
stays with Prosper.
Really?
Yeah, that's-
Oh, the fee. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, once you leave, like all the HRAs for everybody that's upstairs, if there's an unpaid balance when you leave, all that money stays with Prosper.
What's the difference, I guess? I don't accept the one letter.
well, only, let's see, the HSA has to be attached to a high deductible plan. But if somebody is eligible for Medicare benefits, even if they're on a high deductible plan, they have to get the HRA. I mean, there's all sorts of rules, so.
If you've got an HSA account and you go on Medicare, I think you can no longer contribute to the HSA, but you still got it. So you can continue to use the funds that you've accumulated for health-related expenses.
Except our employees haven't accumulated it. It's been, we put it in. Is that correct? I'm
Well,
sorry.
the HRA, there's no, it doesn't go with them.
No, but he says,
The
she's got an HSA. You haven't
Right.
had to contribute to it, have you?
I can, but I don't
Yeah,
have.
you can,
to.
you can have
Yeah.
that too.
Up to a certain limit.
Yeah, it's like 3,500 a year or something.
Can we
Yeah.
reach consensus here on health insurance?
I'll throw it out. I'm happy. I'll just throw it out.
I am as well.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, health insurance, health inflation in the health industry is the worst. And it all seems very reasonable to me.
Well, I feel good that we're giving our employees a better plan. And in the overall scheme of things, even though, would you say, Laura, it's about another 12,000 more? That's a really, really small percentage of our budget. It's a very, very important component of our happiness for our employees, so.
Yeah, I think it's high leverage dollars to give employee satisfaction.
Yeah.
That sounds like.
So you got your answer?
I think we're good.
Yeah. Well, you're still here. All right.
Can I throw out, are we still good?
Yeah.
The playground is a concern to me. The original amount that, I thought, Sarah, you help me out, because the original amount that I thought was going to be 50%. And then in the course of developing the budget, I think what we did was, and I'm sorry, I think this is on page 13. I think what we did was we put in the full amount,
Right.
and then we added something for the structure. So anyway, it came to almost 300,000. Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong. So,
Just-
yeah. Where are we? What page is it?
Yeah, so page 13, just for the playground, the little, I think three part, the 220 is.
That is what it is?
Yeah,
Okay, so it's not the 47 on there.
correct.
If we get the grant, it reduces.
That
If we-
cuts it in half.
That's it.
correct.
And we'll know that in April,
We'll know in December.
in
And
December.
hopefully by the, so she reviews them over the summer. It's one lady, she goes through all the cities that apply. I'm hoping to get some inkling out of it, like towards the end of the summer is my
So-
hope, but December.
So here's my real question is, I know that we did pass that, at that time, I think we were thinking it would be the 50% deal. So if we don't get it, are we wanting to now budget? Are we going to spend 220,000 to put this in? If that's, do we really, or do we want to budget the 50% and hope that we get it? And if we don't get it, it goes away. So that's my question. Do we budget for the whole amount, assuming that we won't get it? Is that what, that's what we're doing here?
So
Assuming,
we hope to get it, but we don't know. If we do get it, it's a windfall and it helps us with the, well, you know, it's one of the items that we come out ahead on at the end of the year. But if we don't get it, we want a playground, we need to spend the money.
when we voted on the playground, we voted to accept the grant.
To apply.
Basically to authorize me to find something that would apply for the grant.
Right. So we did not vote to approve any monies at that time.
That's right.
No.
We know, just to, it's probably a technicality, but we did vote, not to prove this the wrong way, to say that we had the 110K in reserve. So I don't know if that's
We had to-
semantics, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, the city had to.
We did vote on money, but
We
not
would
to
come up-
spend it
We
necessarily.
would come up with that.
Yes,
We
yes,
said
I just,
We would come up with that.
yeah, I wanted to make sure,
In the
yeah.
event of a grant.
Well, I'll shut up. I just want to make sure the
No, I'm
council
not.
is
You know,
okay.
Everybody's heard my opinion on this thing. 220 is too much, and I don't think that I don't think that the residents or the taxpayers would stand it. I mean, we agreed that at half of that, but to put the whole thing in the budget, I just think it's the wrong thing to do.
That's where my mind is as well. That's a lot of money for a playground. I like the playground idea. I just don't like where it is. I won't go into all of that.
I think that money, it was not only the playground, but it was also, it was the gazebo and also the path structure. Goes back to Fox Harbor. It wasn't
The
just. a
walking
playground.
trail kind of thing.
I have no trouble with the walking trail, but I just don't think that is a place for playground. And the other issue I've got, I mean, we're talking about little children. We've got a creek on one side and we've got a busy highway on the other. And while I think there are some very well-behaved children like yours, there are a whole bunch that aren't. And I don't think that's a safe place. There's no toilets, there's no water. It's just, and I think gazebos are very pretty. I don't think anybody's going to use it. I think it's important to do things, but I'm not convinced this particular thing makes sense.
Does somebody want to make a motion to amend the budget as presented?
I move that we put the 50% in that category, because that's what we've already approved it. We said that.
No, actually, we let him apply for it. We didn't
Apply for it.
approve it.
Okay, let's assume that we're going to get the grant, and the money should be in.
So you would vote for the playground?
I think we've already done that. I think
No,
it's the
I
wrong
voted
place.
no.
I think it's the wrong place. I'm against it. But I think we've already voted for it, so.
Well, have you moved to cut that in half? Frank, is that your
Yes.
motion?
That's what.
I would like to second that motion. I think that's,
Okay, I think we're finally ready
Well,
for voting.
Well,
can we have some discussion?
sure. Yeah, I think we all hope we get the grant.
Not all of us.
Well, and if we don't, then many of us feel we need to move, many people in the city and some of us here on the council feel that we need to move forward with the playground and with the path and with the gazebo. So I think the motion's fine. It's been seconded. If we want to have, I tend to vote against the motion. But I think it's a fair point to bring up again. We had an exhaustive discussion. So I'm against it. That's my statement.
Anyone else? All right. Sandra, how do you vote?
No, actually, I wrote yes. Excuse me.
Yeah, I was looking at
Too
my.
late, you voted.
I know, I'm totally confused.
I hope don't.
I vote no.
I vote yes.
Yes.
We got 3-3.
It's 3-3.
Pretty much read a second time of that.
Been there.
Second time this year, John,
Tell me what the motion is.
to cut it in half, right?
Yeah, to be consistent with what we have, this body has done previously, we were authorizing half of that amount.
So your motion is to change the proposed budget by halving the amount.
Having-
Cutting in half.
Okay, I vote no.
I've got one thing that's, you all gonna think it's really small, but, there's on line item 8311, there's a tree planting that's $6,600 and incorporated in that is $3,000. But I will argue with my fellow council members that that's a whole lot more than $3,000.
What line is it?
I'm sorry, John, it's line
11.
8311.
I got
Please make
it.
it-
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I probably said it wrong. So, with all due respect to my great friends on the forestation committee, I see what they're doing. This $3,000 is to cover the city providing trees that will be provided to citizens who request it. The trees so that they, the citizens, would plant them and they, the citizens, would maintain those trees. And those trees could only be planted in the pieces of land between the street and the sidewalk. That happens to be where the water lines are, that happens to be where the irrigation lines are, that happens to be an area that typically is not that wide. Thank you, I didn't know that was out there, but it is. And then we already have a problem with people walking on sidewalks, now walking in the streets because there's so much coverage, what do you call it? Canopy, thank you. Coming over to the sidewalk. So, and then I'm just thinking of, I was on at the committee when it was discussed. So if Frank and I are neighbors and I say, yeah, I'd like to have an elm tree out there, and Frank likes dogwood, so he's going to have a dogwood, and Sarah, let's say she's the next house down and she decides to go with ash trees. So as you're looking down the road, you're going to have a hodgepodge of trees, hopefully planted correctly and hopefully maintained correctly and pruned correctly. And what I think this will evolve into is, so it's not just this year. It's going to be, if we do it one year, we'll say, well, let's do it the next year. So I would argue that this is a 6-digit budget item, because on down the line, that's what it's going to cost. And I think that I respect the forestation's desires to get more trees into our area, but we're not downtown Louisville. We're not hurting for trees. We're surrounded by forests, and that's one of the reasons we have so many deer problems. But I just don't think we need to do this, and I would like to pull the 3,000 out of that particular line item.
It's a motion to amend.
Yes, I make a motion to pull that particular part out of, what was it, 8311?
Yes.
The 3,000 out of that. I'm going to make some enemies with the forestation group.
Would you be amenable to making it? I have always been concerned that we keep talking about this little narrow space for tree planting. And between my sidewalk and the curb, there isn't enough room, even with all the problems, even if they weren't there. I still think we should be encouraging people to plant in their backyards, which are larger. Because if our real goal is to increase the tree canopy, we should be encouraging people to plant in backyard. And I would approve this amount in the event that the restrictions that they've got on it would be lifted. And it would be the encouragement of something that would actually increase the tree canopy, not create the problems you've outlined.
You know, we do, the forestation committee does a pretty good job annually with giving out trees.
Mhm.
And I don't see why this isn't redundant. I think they do a good job. I think that they effectively meet their, whatever criteria they used. They hand out the trees. Unfortunately, much like the canoe launch thing, a lot of people from out of the city come and get the trees. And we don't really have much control over that.
They asked for identifications the last couple of years.
Did they?
Yeah,
Okay,
they did.
That's great. That's great because, but, so they meet their objective of increased planting of trees, tree canopy, et cetera. So I'm questioning, I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm questioning whether it's a redundancy anyway, so the
Yeah,
3,000 should come out.
I think that's a good point. So I would like to move that we pull the 3,000 out of 8311.
Can I add one more to the discussion, just in case? Sorry. I'll speak in the positive to it. Andrea has helped with the program in Anchorage for increasing their tree canopy, and they do the right of way. And I think it's a neat discussion, Sandra, about the backyard versus the front yard. Not necessarily my opinion, but I know the thought behind it was if you give money to the citizen and they plant it in the backyard, then it's not really benefiting all the citizens in terms of when they're out, walking along sidewalks or streets.
The difference with Anchorage is that they're not on sewers. And so all their lot sizes are significantly larger.
And then,
They don't have sidewalks or anything. So the sidewalks are, that's very.
So their front yards are bigger.
Yeah.
I keep speaking.
Yeah,
Go right
keep
into
going.
positive. And just to get I support it, and I get all the things you all are saying. I'm just getting my thing out before the vote comes up. And so their idea was, these are actual, instead of the Arbor Day trees, which are the kind of fairly tiny, they may make it, may not. These are real, these are $300 trees that we're splitting the cost. So these are like 2-inch caliber. These are real, like I planted a tree. And then I know Andrea was really adamant with the forestation board when she was like, hey, if you want me to help, we limit it to basically like 3 trees, 3 types, because she goes, the worst case is what you're saying, where you're like, you get this hodgepodge of goofiness. And so between calling Bud, having a really reduced amount, doing a trial program to see how many you have, you could get real good tree canopy. If things had to be moved for utilities, Andrea could come out and go, you can't plant it next to you're doing it 10 feet away from this other tree. So real, I was like moved by the amount of basically interaction that was going to happen between using a great asset we have for the city, or at least what our tax dollars pay for the city to use that. So I don't know, I thought it was really cool. I think some of the stuff could be mitigated via, hey, your letter says, listen, we don't own this tree, we give it to you. You're putting up 150. So I know you're not probably gonna water it, it's still $150, but hey, we're calling Bud, it's gotta be marked. We're gonna come out and make sure that that's the right thing. And you only get to choose between certain ones. I'm speaking in.
So I've got a question. And I have recalled that the varieties of trees will be limited. So I think that does reduce the risk of a dogwood and a sycamore and a this and a that. But Anchorage has been doing this for a number of years, as I understand it.
80s, yeah.
Since the 80s, and I think they're continuing to do it, so I don't think they're disappointed in the results. Do you know that? I mean, my understanding is they're pretty pleased with.
Yeah. The last forestation board, I know Andrea expressed concern. I think it's kind of indicative in the forestation board report where we got 17. Now, some of those are ash, and that is, everybody's become victim to that. But she did mention, it kind of caught me by surprise. even though not really, but she said, you know, we're an older area. We have a lot of original trees. That's a lot of the character and charm, and a lot of them are starting to fade. And if we don't get kind of a replacement idea out there, and it's a lot of money for people to spend, that people may not do it. You know, they'd rather plant a bush. in the
Especially,
front
we
yard,
don't have
but-
a lot of blue trees in the area we're talking
Or-
about. We have them in our.
Diseased or aging, I guess. Like I have a huge ash tree at the very front. I have a huge sugar maple, silver maple, some kind of maple that's giant. Another one, I mean, in Honey Creek, we have quite, I mean, besides Honey Creek
We
Drive.
got some big trees.
Yeah, you know, and when she said it, my heart kind of dipped down where I was like, because I look at my tree and she goes, and it's not just age. She goes, actually, it's a lot of, we've had droughts, we've had massive flooding, then we had more droughts, then we had this, then we had that. She goes, it's been tough for trees. Anyways, that's my speak in,
Yeah.
that's my speak in the positive.
The average homeowner, well, let me go back and say this. So 2 or 3 years ago, I can't remember exactly how long ago it was. We had a leak in our main water line. Is that what you call it? That goes, the water
Mhm.
comes in here. And so, you know, we lucked out. There was something that happened I don't need to go into. But anyway, one of the bids that I got was because we had a tree in the way, was $9,000. And so, yes, it wasn't all due to that tree. You had to go under the sidewalk. You had to go under the tree. And then there was some other lines, electrical lines that they had to avoid in order to fix that line. But anyway, it worked out okay. It wasn't all that bad, but $9,000 was one of the quotes. So what I'm getting to is, I don't think the average homeowner is going to think that far down the road that, oh my God, it could cost me X amount of dollars, up to and maybe even more than $9,000 if he or she were to have a problem with their water line, and those tree roots are going to seek the water. So, and we don't, and the average homeowner is probably going to think, oh, the city of Prospect supports this program, it must be good. So yeah, give me a couple of trees and I'll put them in my front yard between my sidewalk and my street. And then lo and behold, a few years down the road, there could be major problems. I just don't
Actually, you're
think that's.
right, because on my tiny street with 11 houses, there have been 3 that have had to remove trees and deal with their water lines.
So I mean, I love trees, but I don't want a tree where I have water lines and power lines and all that in that short section that we're hoping that the homeowners will plant them correctly and maintain them correctly, prune them correctly so people can walk down the sidewalk. I just don't think it's a good idea.
You know, whether we, as I understand it, we're contributing to the cost, we're not buying the trees. And if we don't contribute to the cost, and contributing to the cost, I think does encourage people to plant more trees. If we don't do this program, people can go out and plant a tree that they pay for themselves, and you've still got all the problems you're talking about.
And this program calls for planting it in a particular
specific
section.
place.
I understand, yeah, no, but I think those are fair points, and I think it's a good discussion.
Actually, it's also, it's our city, because where you and I live, I'm not going to plant a tree there for any reason whatsoever because of what you've said, because we've got sidewalks and it's very there.
Yeah.
Whereas where you live,
It didn't just,
you've got more flexibility.
Well, the residents could say yes or no.
Right.
Exactly.
yeah, this isn't being forced on
How
anybody.
many trees we talking about? The 3 guys?
It's just,
About,
it's 3,000, about 150.
okay. That's good.
Thank you.
200?
20. There's a 20 pilot program.
23.
As long as Laura said 20 times, 150 is 3,000.
Did we spend 20 minutes on this?
So
We did, so I guess respectfully, is there a motion?
there is, I have a motion, there's a motion.
I interrupted. I apologize.
No, that's okay. There's a motion on the floor to remove 3,000 from the budget on line item 8311, and that 3,000 pertaining to the special residential tree planting program.
That been seconded.
Another question.
Is there a second? To Greg's motion. Someone move a second. Dies for that one second.
No second? Thank you.
I think it's a good discussion. Are there other expense items that we need to address? Anything else? I made the mistake of telling my wife that I would eat supper when I got home.
Yeah, well, that's true. I myself.
Always dinner.
I made it a Snickers bar.
Always dinner.
There's dinner time somewhere.
You have the beer after you have dinner.
Both over experience.
Actually, I've still got the same problem I started with, even after all this discussion, and that is that we are balancing the budget on our reserves, and right now, we don't exactly know what they are, and it's a significant amount of money.
But we know they're more than what we budgeted. We
But
also,
we shouldn't spend them all.
and we also know that the last 3 years we've come in substantially under budget.
I hear you. I'm still.
I think that's a fair
I
point.
think we've spent, I think we're spending an awful lot of money on reserves, and many of these are ongoing expenses. And I am very concerned that 3 or 4 years down the road, we're going to be sitting here talking about tax increases. And I have for a long time felt we paid plenty of money in taxes to everybody.
Agreed. So we've got the motion.
I think we're ready to vote on the resolution.
Well,
We do have a motion for first reading.
Yes.
That's.
Yeah, we're in discussion.
Come back.
Yeah.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. So I'm ready to call for a vote. Right?
So first reading, this is the original one, but yeah, that's fine.
Yes. Right?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
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 City of Prospect ordinance number 609, Central Avenue, series 20.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. City of Prospect ordinance number 609, series 2021, and ordinance establishing a budget for the general fund of the city of Prospect for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021, and ending June 30, 2022. Here are the reading.
Thank you. That's my agenda.
Citizens.
Yeah, this makes. Go ahead, citizens. I think we're done.
Move we adjourn.
Is there,
Do we have to have a motion?
Yeah, there has to be, no, sorry, when there, a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion.
We don't need a yes or no vote on the first reading. We don't need a vote on the first reading, right?
No, we don't.
Thank you. Sorry, I was like, couldn't have sat here for nothing. We got it.
Tired.
I know.
We have
Thank
a
you.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Frank has seconded it. Who's in favor?
Aye.
All of us.
Okay.
Yes.
It was a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen.
That's a good meeting.
Hey, could be worse. Could be Tony Denham. He just got all 19 struck his house. He's trying to go home to see if all his electronic.
Are shorted out.
He talked to his next door neighbor who